Welcome to the Cracking the Growth Code podcast, where we explore practical growth and leadership insights to take you and your organization to the next level. I'm your host, Matt Zimbrowski, and I'm pleased to have as my guest today, Michael Barone. Michael is the Associate Director at Humana and a lean, agile transformation expert with over 30 years of experience in the industry with large-scale transformations. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Matt. Good to be here.
Just to get things started for our audience is full of current and future leaders across various industries. And for those who may not be familiar with Humana or your role there, can you just take a minute and just briefly describe what your role is with Humana and sort of how what your perspective is within the company?
Sure, most certainly. I'm the Associate Director of what we call TechStrat Agile Management Office. I actually created it 3 years ago in an organization named TechStrat, which is made up of 8 sub-organizations. We are synced up using a hub and spoke model to the higher level enterprise Agile hub. My role is to oversee, and this is in my job description, all things Agile within TechStrat. So anybody that needs any type of services, coaching services, things like that, they come to my organization, and we help those 8 organizations work on wherever they are in their level of Agile and start working with them and bringing them up to speed and increase their maturity over time.
That's fascinating. I'm going to ask you one question just to deep dive on context there. About how many teams across those 8 organizations are you talking about when you get into that, like with the level?
The teams would be into the hundreds. We're talking hundreds. There's probably 9 to 12, depending on what day it is, with the spin up of Agile release trains. There's 9 to 12 scattered across those 8 organizations, and a lot of support organizations that cross through all of those. So my role is to work with each of the individual verticals to ensure that the product flows through their organizations as efficiently as possible with the matrix type organization that we have in our IT department. So we basically have a strategy of transformation, upskilling, and workshops and certified training that we work with them on a regular basis. Our goal is to tie the whole organization together as a whole so we can see the work clearly coming through the system and make sure it's efficient as possible. 3 years in, we've made a lot of great progress. We work directly with the SVP and all the VPs underneath it in the 8 organizations, and we're making some really good headway.
That's fascinating. I love all that, Michael. I want to dive into now the core topic here. So when I mentioned the podcast to you earlier, as I was getting to know you, you mentioned that Cracking the Growth Code podcast. Cracking the Growth Code was all you needed to hear to start the conversation. So let's unpack that a little bit. So our audience wants to really crack the growth code on their careers and on their organizations. So what are some key thoughts you have to start the conversation? Like how can someone crack the growth code for their organization?
Well, since you asked, I have a phrase that it has to start with the people. Excuse me. The reaching the people is key to success. What is culture? Culture is made up of the thoughts and beliefs of the people within the organization in which you're training or you're transforming. And in order to have success, you have to reach the people. And that's really where I come from my perspective. I've learned the hard way, unfortunately, throughout my career, that first you learn this new framework, insert framework name here. You learn all these wonderful things. You want to go to your customer and say, here's all the great stuff that you can do. You're coming at them with a framework perspective. Or this new tooling came out that's really going to be much more efficient. Now we're going at them with tooling. And really what that does is it comes against the biggest blocker that I see, and that is their thoughts, right? What are my thoughts? Well, underneath there are the beliefs. And when you start unpacking some of their beliefs, you get into we don't believe that Agile is the way to go, or they believe Agile is Scrum, a real common one. and Scrum doesn't work in our organization. All the various beliefs that they have, don't tell us what to do. We've been doing this for 100 years in some large companies. And it's really, to me, kind of the wrong way to hit them with tooling and framework type discussions. My approach and that in which I coach my team and others, whomever will listen, like your podcast, is meet the people where they are. Go to the people. Well, how do you go to the people? Well, imagine you have a bunch of people come over your house. You don't know them, but you're putting on an event to socialize. Well, you're not going to immediately start with high level things and just beat them down with all your knowledge of what you know about things. You're going to start the small talk, and you're going to slowly build rapport with all these people. You're going to have some exchanges about, what's going on in their lives. You're sharing each other's lives back and forth. There isn't many people that I work with, all of my team members, that I don't know the names of their pets. I don't know the names of their children, their husbands. I know when they're sick, when their relatives are sick, and it's really about bringing empathy to all of this. They're not going to trust us as coaches or transformation agents unless we come at them like we would come at family members.
Yeah, that is fantastic. I want to understand a little bit more of when you've been there about 3 years or so now with this
3 years at Humana,
right?
yes.
So because I love how you say people centric. It starts with people, and people are not just these physical beings. We have thoughts, we have emotions, right? We have empathy that we want to show. So I'm really, really glad we're talking about this, because I'm passionate about the exact same aspects of agile and organizations and leadership. And you touched on culture as well. So walk me through the brief story of sort of when you arrived at Humana and you were given this amazing opportunity to start to affect culture and people and grow the organization. Walk us through some of the key things that you thought were important in order to improve the culture and get it more people-centric and more sustainable in terms of its ability to grow.
Yeah, great question, Matt. I started, like I said, doing this a long time. I know that I have to get to know who I'm going to be working with, right? When I was hired in, it was just an AD, an associate director. I didn't have a team yet. I had to build my own team. So going out and looking for people that share the same type of mindset of people-centric and have the skills. We can hire a lot of people that are certified. We can hire a lot of people that have the skills, but there's not a lot of people, and I shouldn't say a lot, but there's a particular mindset of people that are framework centric or they're tooling centric. And I look for the ones that are all of that, but realize that underneath it, that you need to talk to the people face to face, and you need to get to know them a little bit. It doesn't have to be on a personal level. It can remain on a work level. But if you know one or the other stressing, have a discussion about it. How does this feel to you, right? So that starts to melt the frozen tundra that's between, oh no, here comes another agile consultant coming in to tell us how we should run our business. It's, hey, these people talk to us as if they're on our level. And I've recently heard in a talk that we did across IT feedback that said, you guys resonated with everybody on that call. I had my whole team on the call. We shared the spotlight. Everybody's equal, in my opinion. And we all had our discussions during this call. And the feedback we were getting is, you talked to us. You had conversations with us. You respond to the questions, not from a pedestal looking down, but in the trenches with us. Mm-hmm. And that's been my goal for the 3 years I've been here, is to try to get past all of that cognition that's in the way of don't trust yet one more coach coming in here, because look what happened the last 3 times, mm-hmm. and we didn't gain any efficiencies out of that, et cetera. That's the primary modus operandi that I use. And when I first started, Of course, I get to know my immediate, the tightest circle around me. We're in a COE, so I got to know everybody in the COE using all the ways that I've just explained to you. But then I started to tap into the agile underground, I like to call it. Every corporation has it. It's all the ones that are in the chat room saying, if we could only do this, and then they'll call these side meetings and they'll have 2 or 3 people join from different organizations, and we'll network and we'll start comparing notes. What's working in your area, and can I take that win over to my area and show some wins? And what language is working? People are allergic to certain words that you use. If you say a particular framework, not to pick on one in particular, if you say that name of the framework, the belief system is hit and they like recoil. Like, framework talk. Oh, I don't want to hear framework. Or the use of the word anti-pattern. Oh, it's one of those people that are saying that we're anti-success.
Right.
Word choice is very important. And if you don't get to understand the people at the same level as that party in your house, you're not going to be successful. And even if you are successful, it's going to considerably take you much longer to get there, because you have to overcome those barriers one by one and start knocking those beliefs out of just work with them about a particular belief they may have. And if you don't get into their hearts through their brains, you're not going to be able to be as successful in the timely manner that we're all looking for. So go right to the people, find out where that network is, and then start building that network and building that internal language. What words are they allergic to? If you say LPM, will people hang up on you, right? It's happened to me, literally. And, you're bad connection. And 3 weeks later to get this person back on the call. Lesson learned. Don't use that phrase, right? And just start taking it out of your vocabulary. And then just keep meeting the people where they are on a regular basis.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I want to talk a little bit more about that, and then transition into where you're going next, and how you're doing that, how you're molding the clay. Find it fascinating the way you think this through and how you've approached it. And when you were building your original team, walk me through, because I'm very passionate about the soft skills versus the hard skills, right? You can have a resume that's just stacked with a whole bunch of, I did all these great things, and but then when you meet someone for an interview, it's like, oh, they don't really have that energy or the attitude or the real understanding of the agile mindset and things like this. How do you find really talented and cultural match or cultural fit people to join your team and your organization? I just want to, if you have any tips or tricks or whatever, any
Sure.
your experience.
Yeah, and that's a good question, Matt. And it touches to how you have to always keep in mind is whomever I'm going to hire in is going to have effect on my team culture, the organization culture, and the enterprise culture. So I've had hundreds of interviews come in, or hundreds of resumes come in for every job I post. And it's exhausting, but you have to find the diamonds in the rough. What I find, it's not necessarily the most highest paid. They're the ones with all the stacks of certificates, and when they come in, they talk framework. There are exceptions to the rule, right? I'm not painting everybody with a broad brush, but the diamonds in the rough for me are the ones that have that balance of strong framework knowledge and the strong EQ skills that come with it. And I had mentioned to you prior is I'm a master neuro-linguistic programming practitioner. It's a lot of words to say, NLP master practitioner. So during my interviews, I pose the questions that tap into the EQ side of the person themselves, right? I've been quizzed in interviews of what is this question of this framework and how do you accomplish this? They're testing your framework knowledge, right? And pretty much the resume can show where they are in the level of framework. And I'm a strong belief that hire for culture and train for the skills. So I'm not necessarily looking for that one that has 1,000 certificates. I'm looking for the one that has deep knowledge certificates, but has a strong EQ that goes along with it, because that affects the culture, as I said. So some of the probing questions that I'll ask speak to all the various levels of EQ the best I can in a half-hour meeting with them. And I usually have a pretty good gauge by the time the interview's over of whether there'll be a good culture fit, because it's easy to spot whether somebody knows the frameworks and can come in and train classes and do the work, but are they going to come in and use EQ in a way that's going to alienate my organization from an entire organization? That's critical, because we only have so many coaching cycles before they reach a point of exhaustion, right? Then they don't want to talk to you for 3 months, and then maybe they'll have a question later. So that to me, the EQ aspect, especially and really it's all the roles in Agile, in my opinion, but I'm speaking to just the coaches that I look to hire, is to make sure that they have that strong balance of EQ to go with their framework skills.
I love that. I love how you say hire for culture and train for skills, because that's so important, because hiring is a process, it's an attitude. And I love the way you describe that. And with your background with NLP master practitioner, your skill set in that, I want to pick your brain. I know our audience will be curious too. What's one or two of your favorite EQ evoking questions that you would ask in an interview to anybody? Like it could be a senior agile coach or whoever, but I'm curious. I'd love to
Right.
hear.
So it's really around conflict, because really what happens is the first thing a coach is going to do is come up against the beliefs that I talked about earlier of Agile doesn't work for us, or whatever very long list of things that we've experienced. You have to overcome that. So I challenge them with that right away. You'll hear a lot of people say, what if you say some words to a particular leader and you realize that they've become a little reactive. They sit back a little bit and they start being shorter with their responses. And how do you as a person go about recognizing, for one, that what you're saying isn't landing to them, not resonating with them? What do you watch for when you're speaking to them for those cues that you may need to pull back on what you're saying because it may be coming on too strong, or the body language is pulling away or closing up on them? What do you do? And I try not to give all those little details. I go a little bit larger with the question to see if they can provide those underlying details. What do you do when you seem to be getting resistance from a leader that you're talking to? I'll start with. And hopefully the responses are, when I'm speaking, I can usually pick up on some cues or body cues, and maybe they're not strong in that area, but with response cues, I'm sensing the resistance in the word choices that are coming back. They're pushing back heavier than what I provided them in the form of energy. So I'm sensing resistance. So I realize I have to back off a little bit. So it's a lot of questions that probe into when EQ strengths may be required. And really, a lot of it has to do with the conflicts that come up. You'll hear a common question, an RTE, for example. What if you get people infighting during a PI planning session? How do you go over there and try to smooth that over? Well, the same applies to a coach, right? Because you might have two leaders fighting that I love Kanban or I love Scrum, just to use a rough example. And well, what about both of them? Likely your organization has a strong technical component, which might be ideal for Kanban, but they also might have 20-30% of their work that needs to be planned. So Scrum and Kanban, maybe Scrumban. There's always ways that you can handle a conflict by showing what's in between both of them. What are the consistencies that you can find with both arguments that can help bring closure to that? So I probe with a lot of questions that push them into that EQ realm, and then I gauge the responses accordingly, and that determines who makes it to the panel round. Because then my whole team, during a panel interview, I have very strong, even some of them stronger than me in some technical aspects of framework. They hit them with tough framework questions. Another one hits them with EQ questions. I'll watch what's unfolding and hit them from a different angle with different questions. And it's really to probe into, one, does this person really have the knowledge that they put on their resume regarding the frameworks and tooling, et cetera. But half of our interview, if not more, is focused on, do we really feel this person can add to our team, our family here, and be inviting for others to come have dinner with us, just to keep with the analogy. That's the kind of person we're looking for, and that's what we probe.
I love that. About what would you say your batting average is for that? Because it's never a perfect game, right? We're all humans, I number one, I think your interviewing process and your framework that you apply to it is brilliant. It's obviously matured through the years and gotten to a really good point. I would say it's, from what I've seen in the industry, it's well above average to the efficiency and effectiveness of it, at least the way you've described it. I'm just curious, are you 8 out of 10 when people get hired that they're the right fit, they keep going? Are you 9 out of 10? Are you 5 out of 10? What are your thoughts?
So to open that up broadly across 30 years, right?
Yeah.
Because not to focus on one company, it's because that's important here. We're all talking from different companies. So really, it was a learning experience, right? When I was in a place where framework was the master, so to speak, and I'm really knowledgeable about this framework, and even though I've been better than average, I would say, in the EQ department, they weren't really integrated together. I always saw things separate. Coaching is about framework and didn't really blend as much of the EQ in. So my hires in that regard would have been more that were aligned with my thought process. And I may have thought that this coach seems a little foo-foo to me, or whatever word about way out there in like mystique land or whatever. But that's not the case today, and that was a growing experience. So I'll just say that my batting average has improved significantly into a 9 out of 10 range. So it really comes down to making sure that you're probing into those EQ questions deeply enough to be really sure, because we're coaches, and when we're coaches, we have the ability to speak to people. And you might get that occasional one that is really, really good on their feet during interviews. But when you put them into a problem situation with a leader, they might become more reactive, and that happens. But really, I kind of look at it as, even with a 90% batting average, everybody's going to have a bad day. Everybody is going to have some things going on at home or things going on at work, or both. They're going to come in with some energy that's going to make them a little bit more susceptible to being reactive to a response from a leader. So, there's a lot to take into account, right?
There's a lot there, but that's great. That's where I expected your answer to be, and that's good. And I like how you walked it through your progression, your journey over the course of your experience to get here, because it takes time, and it's been a conscious effort to improve that over time. Right. Now, looking forward on the horizon, with your current organization, what does success look like for you? Say 12 months from today, you've grown the organization to a healthy place now, and we've had a good conversation about a lot of the ways that you've done that. What does success look like for you going forward? Like, what's next in your growth journey?
Well, I'll respond from a systems dynamics perspective because I'm an AD that oversees all things agile for about 5,000 people within IT. It's a huge organization, but Humana is much larger, right? The corporation is much larger than the organization that I oversee. Agile is evolutionary if you're doing it right. And if you can get the system to start self-actualizing, that's success to me. And what does self-actualizing mean in a system of agile? That is, let's just keep it small scale. When a team does all of their ceremonies and they're running through and doing it by the book, let's just say. It's a greenfield team. So you got them, you have them following exact processes. What you see is a storming norming phase.
Mm-hmm.
As they trip over each other, you're guiding them through this. But there comes a point where there are retrospectives, especially, and I call that the key meeting in all of Agile, as long as you're operationalizing the feedback from those retrospectives. That's the system giving feedback to the leaders and to the team that says, we have some improvement to do. And I like to say, no, it's not improvement. It's evolution. We're all evolving. Agile, to me, a is a lifestyle of continuous improvement. And I say lifestyle on purpose because there's rarely anybody that doesn't live an agile life. You don't take 50 steps to brush your teeth every day. Over time, you've improved that process to where you got it down to your 2 minutes, your toothbrush is put away quickly, and all the things you do in your life, you've been agile with. So to me, when that system starts to feedback, it becomes self-actualized. They're self-improving. They're using their continuous feedback loops to improve over time. Then you scale that up to programs, you scale that up to organizations. To me, success means when all of the organizations are self-actualized in one container, and that container is giving feedback to the CEO directly. Then that input to the CEO trickles down in the form of new initiatives,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now it has that continuous feedback loop, and that's a self-actualized system, in my opinion. So that's my ultimate goal wherever I go. Over the past 5 years, especially studying quantum physics and studying NLP, I realized in deep studies of systems dynamics and all that tied together is a living organism called a corporation. And if you can get that organization or organism healthy, it self-actualizes.
Yeah, it's beautiful the way you describe that with a self-actualized organization and the lifestyle of continuous improvement. I look for that in companies. I look for that in people. I look for that in teams. And the more that's in there is better. I've seen a lot of organizations get hung up on trying to force a learning culture, whereas if you make it more part of the fabric, whereas we want the, as you say, lifestyle of continuous improvement. We want that. We want everybody to have that. We want all the teams, the organizations to have that, because then it has the feedback loop. There's a lot of different ways to learn and a lot of different ways to grow within the organization and outside the organization. As we bring this to a close, I want to get some tangible takeaways for our audience. If you were to distill some of your experience and your wisdom down into three different tips for leaders, what are top 3 tips you have for leaders? Maybe they're current leaders in organizations like yourself. Maybe they're up and coming leaders and they want to grow into a stronger leadership role in a company. What are your top 3 tips for leaders that you have to share?
Just to get all the way back to the people-centric, right? Let that be the caption for anything that I'll say now. If you start with the people, if you make the people first, frameworks, tooling, and all the other stuff that comes with it second, it will come, but it comes in the right time. If you, as you said earlier, if you try to force this from the beginning, you meet that resistance, which is the cognitive blocks, and then you have to start trying to rework your method and having to go back at this a second and third time. You've burned coaching cycles. They're listening a little bit less each time. So start off right away with the people. Get to know the people would be the second one. And that's really to not only know who they are just at work. And I'm not saying you need to pry into their personal lives, but I see your background. I can see a lot of things about you just by the background that you're sharing, right? And if I was to pick up on any of those, like a background, for example, with a VP that I worked with, she has her boat in the background, and I'm a former boater. So right away, we had something in common. So my conversation while we were on a call prior to everybody else joining. Said, is that a boat? Because it was really zoomed in. So it was a little camper boat. They sort of looked the same zoomed in. Yeah. And then she rattled on all the statistics about her boat. And I started talking about our boat. And people were jumping in and they're talking, as they joined, they were talking about their boats. And that's meeting them where they are. That's connecting at a heart level, right? That's what I recommend is start with the people, get to know them a little bit, even if just cursorily at work. You don't need to know all their intimate details, but start with the people and get to know them. And the third one is to network with like-minded people, right? Everybody kind of by default in the agile industry does that, right? They find the people that know what's going on and pull them into their circle or join their circles, whatever it might be, but make a conscious effort to actually go out there and seek them. They're not always obvious, and ask them, hey, is there anybody else that's talking about this? And then look to start forming a little community around that, because that's part of the culture. It might be the under culture for right now, the
Mhm.
culture underneath. But if you study a little bit about anthropology, it only takes 7% of the culture to change the entire culture. So if you can get 7% of those change agents working together, singing the same tune, you can in fact affect the culture.
I love the answer with starting with people, putting people first, and then developing the relationships with the people. Meet them where they're at, and connect with your hearts. That's brilliant. I haven't heard anybody say it that way before, but I love that, to really develop the relationship, really cut through the mental chatter and just get right to the real essence and the heart and soul of the person, and to really connect to relationships there, and then network with other like-minded people. That's another great tip to provide more energy. As you said, you're looking to get to that 7% tipping point where now we're going to really affect good cultural change, whether that's in your community or whether that's in the workplace, wherever it is. But that's really important to for everybody to think about. So thank you very much for sharing those tips for the leaders of today's and tomorrow's organizations. I really appreciate that, and loved having you here on the show, Michael. Absolutely pleasure to learn from you and grow with you through the journey of your experience here. So thank you very much for your time and energy.
Thank you, Matt. I've had a lot of fun. Really appreciate your time.